السيدات والسادة الكرام، نأمل منكم التفضل بالجلوس على مقاعدكم. سنبدأ الآن. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are starting now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a refreshing lunch and are ready for our next exciting session. Our next lecture takes us on a fascinating journey through the eyes of European travelers who documented their experiences in the Najd region. These unique accounts shed light on Diriyah's rise as a center of influence and its enduring cultural legacy. Titled European Travelers' Observations on Najd, The Rise and Legacy of Diriyah, and hosted by IASA, this session offers valuable perspectives on how Diriyah was viewed beyond its borders. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Julian Janssen van Rensburg, an accomplished archaeologist, cultural heritage expert, and a trustee at the IASA. Dr. Julian, the stage is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for being here. And again, thank you for the organizers for inviting me again. It's really nice to be here at the second DGS conference here. And so as a trustee of the International Association for the Study of Arabia, it gives me great pleasure to start with our first slide here, just to give you an update on what IASA is. So as you can see, I'll put it there, yeah, good. Charitable organization exists to advance public knowledge through the promotion of research, cultural and natural heritage of the Arabian Peninsula. And we obviously promote, I won't read this all out to you, but you can see we do research related to the archaeology, history, epigraphy, languages, almost everything, through to ethnography, geography, geology, and natural history. And to do this, we award research grants, we produce our own publications, which I'll go into in a minute. We also disseminate news of research, events connected with Arabia, such as this wonderful event here. And we organize our own lectures and conferences, in particularly the Seminar for Arabian Studies. And if you just give me a minute there, I'll explain to you that the Seminar for Arabian Studies is sort of an annual international forum for the presentation of the latest academic research on the Arabian Peninsula. And the subjects that we cover in that, again, are everything listed out here: archaeology, history, epigraphy, languages, literature, art, culture, ethnography, geography. And we look at everything from the earliest day to the present time right through. So, and we look at everything as well from the political and social history, up to the end of the Ottoman Empire. And the first IASA was in June 1970, and we published the first volume containing the papers of the fourth seminar that was held in Cambridge, volume 1 in 1971. And since then, the proceedings have been published every year after the conferences. We also run special sessions as well as a wide range of subjects from main sessions, and the seminar offers an opportunity for more detailed discussions of a particular area of research by invited speakers to a special session lasting half a day or even to a full day. And the papers read at special sessions are normally for publication in the proceedings of the Seminar for Arabian Studies, which is published every year, and a volume will be coming to you shortly, and all as a supplement to the pieces. So the 57th Seminar for Arabian Studies was held in Paris on the 27th, 29th of June this year, and the 58th Seminar for Arabian Studies will be held in Abu Dhabi. The dates to be confirmed yet. So, as you can see, there's a website. Please visit the website, and if you want to be involved with the IASA, you're very welcome to join as a member, and knowing that your contribution will go forward to producing funding that will be helping young scholars present their research and undertake further work in the Arabian Peninsula. So I'll take off my trustee hat now and put on my other hat. So we just now talk about the European legacy here in Diriyah. So the accounts of Sadler, Palgrave, Corners, Mengen, and Philby, they offer these valuable insights into the architecture, agriculture, and social structure of the Najd during a period of significant change, as we are aware. And from the grandeur of Diriyah's stone and mud palaces to the agricultural richness of Wadi Hanifa, these travelers documented a region where the built heritage and natural resources are inextricably linked. Their observations reveal a society that, despite its political upheavals, maintained a deep connection to its land, and with architecture that was shaped by the materials available, and agriculture sustained by careful irrigation and seasonal rhythms. So, throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, these European explorers made their way into the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, and their accounts provide a rich, invaluable resource of the region's architecture, agriculture, and social structures, and focusing on Diriyah, Wadi Hanifa, and the town of Manfur. The observations of George Foster Sadler, William Gifford Palgrave, and Harry St. John Philby, alongside Louis Alexander Oliver de Corretz and Felix Mengen, they offer deep insight into changing fortunes of this location, and that provide detailed descriptions that help us understand the impact of environmental factors, how local resources were used, and historical shifts on architecture and agriculture. And they give us a picture of life in the Najd region at a key moment in its history. So here we can see William Gifford Palgrave, Felix Mengen. I do not have a picture of him, just one of his tombs. And Louise Alexander de Corretz, a self-portrait with lovely. And George Foster Sadler, as you can see. And of course, I'm sure we all of it know who Harry St. John Philby is, because he recently passed through on the Philby-Rickman's tour there. So amazing people, and we can learn all about what they did. So here I just go into the architecture. Now, sort of one of the key elements described by European travelers is the region's architecture. And as we know, it's heavily influenced by the availability of local materials and the environmental conditions of the Najd. So central to these accounts is Diriyah, cradle of the capital of the first Saudi state, which was obviously fallen in 1818 following the Ottoman Egyptian invasion led by Ibrahim Pasha. But interestingly, the ruins of the city are described in vivid detail by Sadler and later Palgrave, and both offer significant insights into the construction techniques and the urban layout of this once great city. And George Sadler, in his 1818 journey through the region, provides probably one of the most detailed accounts of Diriyah's architecture just before its decline. He describes how the city's buildings were constructed using yellow earth and flat stones, and how the foundations of the walls were made of large stones which were cemented with mud, and the upper walls were constructed primarily of the same earth, so giving these structures their characteristic solidity. And according to Sadler, each layer of the walls was laid down after the previous one had dried. And yet this simple but effective technique was used to build houses that were up to 3 to 4 stories high. And despite the inherent simplicity of this process, the structures were durable and reflected the local environment, conditions, and materials. The yellow earth was used in construction was a critical resource due to its abundance and its sort of adhesive properties. And Sadler describes this material as found in abundance over all parts of Arabia, specifically in Diriyah, and notes its ability to form a solid mass when mixed with water and dried. He observes that this type of construction did not require much labor beyond that of the family who built the house. So here we give a light insight into how these houses were constructed, and also that we weren't bringing in outside people. It was actually not local artisans, but families who were constructing their own buildings. And while Diriyah's domestic architecture was primarily utilitarian, and it reflected the harsh and limited resources available and the climate, Sadler also notes the city's defensive structures. And he describes a range of towers connected by walls to the western side of the city, and which provided protection on the otherwise exposed flank. And the natural eminence of the terrain, which also plays a significant role in the city's defensive layout, and with parts of Diriyah being built on higher ground, also to avoid the threat of flooding of Wadi Hanifa. The French observer, Correns, my French colleagues, they can correct me on my pronunciation here, stationed in the region as consul, complements Sadler's observations with additional detail. So Correns, informed by first-hand accounts, records that Diriyah was a city built of stones, underscoring its unique architectural heritage. And he describes construction techniques involving quarried stone for most foundational structures, layered with an earth-mixed rubble in upper sections, which marked Diriyah's distinctiveness in the Najd region. And this approach, according to Correns, not only fortified the buildings, but set the city apart from the Yamamam region, where such extensive stone use was rare. Moving on to Mengen, a temporary French trader, consul, and writer, and he adds further to our understanding of Diriyah's historical and social structure, estimating its population at about 13,000 people, and portraying a city with significant political and religious stature. He clarifies that Diriyah served as both a provincial capital and religious center, comprising notable districts like Tureif and Bujeri, just down the road, and which these areas housed mosques, madrasas, administrative buildings, and all reflecting the authority within the Wahhabi state. And then when William Palgrave visited Diriyah, some 40 years after Sadler, he encountered a city in a far more ruined state. And here, Palgrave's descriptions focus on the desolate grandeur of the city's remains, portraying Diriyah as a magnificent desolation, where ruins of palaces, mosques, and homes stood as silent witness to the city's former power, since no permanent occupation in the area until the second decade of the 20th century. And he describes pillars, arches, and walls that survived time and war, and noted the profound sense of loss that pervaded the site at this time. One of the things is Palgrave, it really struck him, he's particularly struck the remains of Tureif, the district that once housed the palaces of the Saud family and the Great Mosque. And he describes the ruins as forming a picture of battered magnificence, a pillar here, a wall there, a tumbled arch, and a houseless doorway. His poetic description of the city streets, still visible despite the destruction, paints a picture of a once bustling urban center that had been abruptly abandoned. For Palgrave, Diriyah was more than just a city. It was a symbol of the political power whose ruins bore silent testimony to the fortunes of the first Saudi state. And Palgrave's portrayal contrasts quite dramatically with Sadler's more practical observations of Diriyah's architectural techniques, where Sadler's focused on the functionality of the materials in the city's buildings. Palgrave is more interested in the symbolism of the ruins and what they represented. So his description of headless palm trees and broken wells scattered amongst the ruins, it evokes a sense of natural and human destruction, and just highlights the environmental degradation that accompanied Diriyah during 1880. And by the time Harris and John Philby visited Diriyah in the 1918, the city was largely abandoned, with only small villages scattered across the valley. However, Philby's account provides valuable insights into reoccupation of the surrounding area, as well as the enduring significance of the architectural remains of Diriyah. While the palaces and mosques remain deserted, Philby describes the nearby villages of Awad, Malwa, and Alib, where peasants lived in mud huts and cultivated the palm groves that still thrived in the valley. Philby observed that the ruins of Diriyah had not been fully reclaimed by the local population, noting that the palace walls, towers, and mosques of Turayf still stood largely untouched. And he contrasts the magnificent ruins of Diriyah with the humble dwellings of the modern inhabitants, remarking there is absolutely no similarity between the unwalled settlements of mud huts and the city that once dominated the valley. His observations emphasize the continuity of agricultural life in the valley, even as political and urban centers shifted away from Diriyah to nearby Riyadh. Philby's attention to architectural detail, however, includes references to things like the limestone pillars, the corbelled arches, and that characterize many of the buildings we see in Diriyah. And he also noticed the scarcity of decorative elements in the construction, reflecting the region's emphasis on functionality over aesthetics. And these simple, sturdy buildings, he comments, constructed from local materials, were well suited to the environmental conditions of the center of Najd, where rain and heat pose constant threats to more elaborate architectural designs. So in addition to their observation of architecture, these European travelers like Sadler, Palgrave, and Philby also paid close attention to the agricultural practice of Najd. And agriculture was the backbone of the region's economy and played a critical role in shaping its settlements and social structures. And in their accounts, the travelers frequently remarked on the importance of irrigation, the seasonal torrents of the Wadi Hanifa, and the wide variety of crops that are grown in the region, from dates, wheat, to figs and cotton. But one of the most important aspects of life in the Wadi Hanifa Valley is the presence of these torrents that brought water from surrounding mountains down into the valley. And Sadler provides a detailed description of how these torrents, which occurred 4 to 5 times a year during the storms of the winter and spring, would swell the dry valley wadis into a raging river that revived the thirsty soil. Love these comments that these travelers are making. And the arrival of these floods, how critical it was for the agricultural reason, allowing the inhabitants to cultivate dates, wheat, barley, and other crops on an annual basis. Whereas Sadler also notes that the villages surrounding Diriyah were well supplied with water from deep wells, which supplemented the torrents during the dry season. So these wells allowed the farmers to maintain their date plantations and other crops throughout the year, even when the wadi was not in flood. So this system of well irrigation combined with seasonal floods creates a very complex agricultural infrastructure that sustained life in the valley. And Philby later, he observed similar irrigation techniques, noting that the water from torrents was distributed over the gardens through a system of canals, ensuring that every field received its share of water. He also describes the walled gardens to protect the fields from the harsh desert winds, and the clever use of wells to irrigate the land even in the hottest months of summer. And Philby's observations highlight the enduring importance of agricultural engineering in Najd, where water was scarce and every drop had to be managed extremely carefully. In addition to the dates, which is clear, were one of the most important crops of the region, the European travelers also document a wide variety of fruits, vegetables, grains that were cultivated in the Wadi Hanifa Valley. And Sadler, for instance, observed that even after the devastation caused by Ottoman invasion, the valley still produced figs, grapes, pomegranates, apricots, melons, and even cotton for the textile industry. And he also noted that peaches and watermelons are cultivated in the valley, providing a very diverse range of fruits for the local population. Just the richness of Wadi Hanifa is amazing here. As Palgrave also emphasizes again this agricultural wealth of the region and describes how the palm groves of Diriyah once produced fine dates alongside other Mediterranean fruits like apricots and peaches, and he notes that the valley's gardens were filled with fruit trees and vegetable patches. And he even remarks on the cultivation of wheat and barley in the fields that were surrounding the villages. And these crops, of course, were vital for the sustenance of the local population. And there again, their abundance speaks to the fertility of the valley soils. And again, as we move on to Philby, who provides further details on the harvest season, he describes how the wheat and barley crops are harvested in spring with oxen used to thresh the grain before it was winnowed. He also notes how they grew lucerne, a type of fodder crop which was grown to feed the region's livestock, particularly camels and horses. And it then goes on to describe this diverse agricultural system, which is sustained by the combination of irrigation, seasonal floods. It just allowed the inhabitants of Wadi Hanifa to maintain a self-sufficient economy, even in times of turmoil. And again, the agricultural practice of Najd also had a profound impact on the social structures of the region. And Sadler, for instance, notes the presence of outlying farmhouses, which are only inhabited during winter and spring when the wheat and barley were planted and harvested. And these seasonal settlements reflect the close relationship between agriculture and settlement patterns, with farmers moving between villages and fields depending on the agricultural calendar. Philby also remarks on the role of women, mentioning how, especially during the agricultural economy, and particularly during the harvest season, and he describes how women from the poorer classes were often seen working in the fields, helping to gather the crops, glean the fields after the harvest. And this involvement of women in agriculture speaks to the communal nature of farming in the region, where every member of the family and the community had a role to play in ensuring the success of the harvest. So just going on to Diriyah's historical and political context, when we're looking at these accounts of European travelers, they also provide a political and historical framework for understanding the changes that occurred during Najd, specifically during the 19th century, particularly during the time of Diriyah in the 1818. And as the capital of the first Saudi state, Diriyah was a symbol of political and religious authority, but with its fall in 1818 marked a sort of end of an era, so to speak. And Sadler's account, written just after the Ottoman Egyptian invasion, provides a vivid portrait of the destruction wrought on Diriyah by Ibrahim Pasha's forces. And he describes how the city's walls were destroyed, its date plantations demolished, and its houses were left in ruins. According to Sadler, the palaces of Turaif, once a resident of the Saud family, were reduced to ruins, and that the population of the city had either fled or been killed. Whereas Palgrave, his later account, describes not a living soul appeared in the once great city, and how the ruins of palaces, mosques, and homes stood as a mute witness to the city's tragic fall. While Sadler and Palgrave focused on the destruction of Diriyah, Philby offers a much more optimistic view of the city's legacy. And he notes that while Turaif remained in ruins, the surrounding villages and farmhouses had begun to recover. And he notes how the peasants were reoccupying the valley and again cultivating the palm groves that sustained the city for centuries. And Philby's account again reflects the sort of resilience of the region's inhabitants, who had managed to rebuild their lives even after Diriyah's destruction. And Philby sees this Diriyah's architecture as a symbol of the region's cultural continuity, and noting how the limestone pillars and the mud brick walls of the city had endured despite the passage of time. For Philby, Diriyah's ruins were not just a reminder of the city's fall, but a testament to the enduring strength of the Najdi people and their ability to adapt and thrive in a harsh and unforgiving environment. As you see, the accounts of Sadler, Palgrave, and Philby offer a comprehensive picture of agriculture, architecture, and social structure of Najd during a period of profound change. From the palaces and defensive walls of Diriyah to the seasonal floods and irrigation channels of Wadi Hanifa, these travelers documented a society that was deeply connected to its environment and its resources. Despite the destruction of Diriyah and the political upheavals of the 19th century, the agricultural wealth of the region and the resilience of its people ensured that life continued, even in the face of adversity. But one other thing I mentioned here is exploration. With these travelers, they laid the groundwork for further exploration, leading to some of the first European archaeological expeditions. Like 40 years later, after Philby's travel, the Belgians, Liepmans and his son Jacques and Philippe Lippens embarked on the Reichmans Lippens expedition from 1951 to 1952, which was guided by Harris and John Philby. As a trusted advisor to King Abdulaziz ibn Saud, Philby used his position to explore central and southern deserts extensively in the 1930s. An expedition that covered over 5,500 kilometers and documented approximately 12,000 inscriptions and rock art across Saudi Arabia's western, southern, and central regions. And again, this expedition adds a significant layer of archaeological understanding, not only in terms of Diriyah and in terms of that, but in terms of Saudi Arabia generally in this area. And it's also that these type of explorations, specifically this one, they provide some of the first and most comprehensive views we have of rock art in the region. Indeed, it is the notes that were taken during this expedition that allowed Anati, a prominent rock art scholar, to actually provide one of the largest and most comprehensive rock art volumes that we have, and just from the photographs of this expedition. So as we see, these early European explorers, they really did provide us a lot of detail with regards not only to Diriyah, but the wider environment here. So thank you again for your time, and I'll happily answer any questions you may have. No questions.